Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Spruce Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 8 college football rankings. So we'll start off by briefly recapping my rankings from last week and what those teams did in Week 7. Last week at number 10, I had Indiana. They upset Oregon, winning 30-20. Ninth, I had Texas Tech. They easily beat Kansas, winning by a score of 42-17. 8th, I had LSU. They beat South Carolina 20-10. 7th was Alabama. They beat Missouri 27-24. 6th, I had Oklahoma. They lost to Texas 23-6. 5th, I had Texas A&M. They beat Florida 34-17. Number 4, I had Ole Miss. They barely beat Washington State 24-21. 3rd was Oregon. They lost to Indiana 30-20. 2nd was Miami. They were on a bye. And number 1, I had Ohio State. They beat Illinois 34-16. But getting into this week's rankings, beating things at number 10, I've got Georgia. So Georgia, they enter my top 10 after they beat Auburn by a score of 20-10. And I really didn't want to move Georgia into my top 10 because they did not play that well, but I really don't think I could put anyone else here because the other options are Tennessee, a team that lost to Georgia at home, or the other teams all lost. So I kind of have to have Georgia here at number 10, although I don't love it. But this was a classic game for Georgia over the past few years. Looked terrible in one half, great in the second half. But Georgia, they were not good in the first half. They were down 10-0 with 2 minutes left. But then they forced a fumble at the goal line, and everything changed. As from that point on, they outscored Auburn 20-0. But the offense for Georgia, they were okay. They finished the game with 20 points and 296 total yards. And quarterback Gunnar Stockton was decent, throwing for 217 yards, and also running for 26 yards and a touchdown. And then the defense for Georgia, they were great. They allowed just 10 points, didn't allow any points in the second half, and obviously they forced the fumble at the goal line, which was really the turning point in the game. But while I don't love having Georgia here at number 10, and I don't think they played that well, after the win over Auburn, I do have them here at number 10. Number 9, I have LSU. So LSU, they fall a spot from number 8 to number 9, after they beat South Carolina, also by a score of 20-10. And the reason I'm dropping LSU a spot is they're just not as good as we all think they are. Their defense is great, but their offense is just not that good. And that was true again this week, as their offense put up just 20 points, and they struggled to finish drives, scoring just 1 touchdown and 5 red zone trips. Now, the good thing about the offense this week for LSU is they did move the ball effectively, as quarterback Garrett Nussmeier threw for 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, and they were also good on the ground with 6 yards per carry and 168 yards, although the offense also turned it over 3 times. And then on the defensive side of the ball, LSU was great. They held South Carolina to just 10 points, got 5 sacks, and also forced 2 turnovers. But despite the win for LSU, I do have them falling a spot to number 9. 8th, I have Oregon. So Oregon falls to number 8 after they lost their first game of the season, losing to Indiana by a score of 30-20. And this wasn't a great performance for Oregon. The offense for Oregon scored just 20 points, although the offense itself scored just 13 when you factor in that the defense had a pick 6. But the offense for Oregon was not good. Quarterback Dante Moore threw for just 186 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And Oregon also couldn't get anything going on the ground, as they ran for just 81 yards on 2.7 yards per carry. And then the defense for Oregon really wasn't that bad, although they did end up allowing 30 points and 343 total yards. But this loss for Oregon isn't terrible, but they still didn't play that well. And this snaps their 18-game home winning streak, and it's their first loss at home since the 2022 season. But after the loss to Indiana, I've got Oregon falling to number 8. Number 7, I have Texas Tech. So Texas Tech checks in at number 7 after they dominated Kansas, winning 42-17. And this was another good win for Texas Tech. The offense continued to play well with 42 points, although quarterback Baron Morton did leave the game with an ankle injury, and he did not return. And then backup quarterback Will Hammond came in, and we have seen him play well, such as the second half against Utah, but he was not great in this week's game, throwing for just 42 yards and an interception. Although he did run the ball well, with 61 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Texas Tech's offense as a whole ran the ball extremely effectively, as running back Cameron Dickey ran for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Texas Tech as a team ran for 372 yards and 4 touchdowns. So even though they didn't throw the ball too effectively, the run game and the offense was still really good. And then the defense for Texas Tech, they also played well. They allowed 17 points, forced a turnover, plus they got 9 sacks, including 3 from David Bailey, who's actually having an insane season and leads the country with 8.5 sacks. But this was a good win for Texas Tech, dominating a pretty solid Kansas team and playing most of the game with their backup quarterback, and I've got Texas Tech coming in at number 7. Number 6, I have Alabama. So Alabama comes in at number 6 after they beat Missouri by a score of 27-24. And this was another good win for Alabama. The offense played well, putting up 27 points against a good Missouri defense, and quarterback Ty Simpson had another good game, throwing for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the run game for Alabama wasn't amazing, with just 126 yards on 2.9 yards per carry, plus running back Jam Miller left the game with an injury. But the offense was still pretty good. Then defensively for Alabama, they played well. They allowed 24 points and also forced 2 turnovers, plus they were great on third down, allowing Missouri to convert 1 time in 10 tries. But this was a good win for Alabama, going on the road and beating a good Missouri team, and it actually snapped Missouri's 15-game home winning streak. But after the win for Alabama, they have now won 5 in a row after the Week 1 loss to Florida State, and I've got Alabama at number 6. Getting into the top 5 at number 5, I've got Texas A&M. So Texas A&M, they've remained at number 5 after they beat Florida by a score of 34-17. And this was a good win for Texas A&M. The offense played well, putting up 34 points, and they did it against a good Florida defense. And 34 points is actually the most points Florida has allowed all year. The quarterback Marcel Reed had a good game, throwing for 234 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And Texas A&M was also great on the ground, rushing for 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball for Texas A&M, they got off to a little bit of a slow start, allowing 14 points in the first quarter, but then they only allowed 3 points the entire rest of the game. But this was a good game for Texas A&M. They're now 6-0, and I've got them at number 5. Number 4, I have Ole Miss. So Ole Miss remains at number 4 after they beat Washington State by a score of 24-21. And this wasn't a great game for Ole Miss, because they barely beat a Washington State team that's not very good. But the offense for Ole Miss, they only scored 24 points, although they moved the ball pretty effectively with 439 total yards. And quarterback Trinidad Chambliss continued to play well, as he threw for 253 yards, and he had 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing. And then speaking of running the football, Ole Miss ran the ball really effectively, with 168 yards as a team. 142 of them came from running back Kawan Lacey. And then defensively for Ole Miss, they weren't terrible, but also weren't great, as they allowed 21 points and 345 total yards, but the defense did get 4 sacks. But this wasn't a very impressive win for Ole Miss, but still decent. And if you want to switch Texas A&M and Ole Miss and put A&M at 4, Ole Miss at 5, I'm perfectly fine with doing that. I actually thought about doing that, but I decided to just keep it the way I had it, with Texas A&M at 5 and Ole Miss at number 4. Third, I have Indiana. So Indiana, they jump up to number 3 after they beat Oregon by a score of 30-20. And this was a great win for Indiana, because it showed they're an elite team. Because coming to this week's game, I thought Indiana was similar to last year's team, where they were good but not great. But this win over Oregon showed they're elite, because they went on the road and they beat one of the 5 to 10 best teams in all of college football. But this was a big win for Indiana. On the offensive side of the ball for Indiana, they played pretty well. Quarterback Fernando Mendoza was solid, throwing for 215 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And receiver Elijah Surratt also had a huge game, with 8 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. And then on the ground, Indiana was also good, with 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Indiana, they played really well, as they held a really good Oregon offense to just 13 points, and they also did a great job pressuring Dante Moore, sacking him 6 times. But this was a really impressive win for Indiana, and after their big win over Oregon, I've got them at number 3. Second, I have Miami. So Miami, they've remained at number 2. They were on a bye this week. Next week, they host Louisville. And coming in at number 1, I've got Ohio State. So Ohio State, they've remained at number 1 after they beat Illinois by a score of 34-16. And this was another solid win for Ohio State. The offense played pretty well, although they didn't put up insanely impressive numbers, but the offense was still good. Quarterback Julian Sain threw for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he's now thrown for multiple touchdowns in 5 straight games. And on the ground, Ohio State, they were okay, with just 109 yards on 3.1 yards per carry, although they did run for 2 touchdowns. And then the defense for Ohio State, they also played well, allowing 16 points, getting 4 sacks, and forcing 3 turnovers. But this is another good win for Ohio State. I don't think they played their best game, but they were still able to go on the road and beat a top 20 Illinois team by 18 points. But this is another good win for Ohio State, and I've got them at number 1. And here are my updated college football playoff predictions. So not a whole ton has changed, but I'm just going to run through the seeds real quick. My 1 seed is Ohio State, 13-0, winning the Big Ten. 2 seed, I have Indiana at 12-1. 3 seed I have Alabama at 12-1, winning the SEC. My 4 seed is Miami, 12-1, winning the ACC. 5 seed I have Georgia at 11-2. 6 seed I have Texas Tech at 12-1, winning the Big 12. 7 seed I have Texas A&M at 11-1. 8th seed I have Oregon also at 11-1. My 9th seed is Ole Miss at 10-2. 10th seed I have Notre Dame at 10-2. My 11th seed I have Tennessee at 10-2. And my 12th seed is the Group of 5 Conference Champion. So I've actually switched this to South Florida. I've had Tulane there for the past few weeks, but I decided to switch it to South Florida. They just destroyed a very good North Texas team this past week, and they're my updated pick. But if you want to have somebody like Tulane or Memphis there, I can definitely understand it. But those are my Week 8 college ball rankings and my updated college ball playoff predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.